To be young, gifted, and learning disabled by Lauren Auld. Writing about myself is an odd thing to me, with how it's just weird to me to write about myself and what is going on in my life. Though, if and when I do write about myself, it's in the hope that one day I or someone else will remember who I was. I'd like to think if in the future I have a relative who is trying to understand what kind of person I was when I was younger, they will get to see or technically read that I was a person who was creative and liked to write. Growing up in South Lake Tahoe has made me someone who likes nature and the mountains. When I was younger, I wanted to live in a big city and live in an apartment in a busy part of town. But after a trip to Anaheim, California, I quickly realized I don't like the big city very much, with all the light pollution, air pollution, and a puddle of what looked like sludge I walked past. So it was safe to say the big city stopped seeming so spectacular to me. So living in Lake Tahoe is just something I enjoy, with its lesser amounts of air pollution and light pollution, with its puddles that don't look like sludge. My mom and dad have always been open with showing love and care, like saying I love you when heading out the door to me or each other, to show they care. Even when they're fighting, they still say I love you. My parents, on the days I walk home because they are busy or doing something, they always try to check in over text or call to make sure I get home safe. Most people think being an only child is fun because you don't have siblings that bother you or have all your parents' attention. That's not exactly how it works. Growing up, I was always kind of lonely, with how after school there weren't any kids to play with at home. Sure, it had my parents, but they weren't kids with endless energy, though I was able to combat not having other kids at home with constantly asking my parents to take me to the park and being there for hours on end. Also, when you're an only child, your parents often ask you more about school and homework than they would if you had siblings, which could be annoying sometimes. Tag and hide and seek were a constant game I would play at the park with my friends. I can hardly remember a time when we didn't play the game while at the park. One of our favorite versions of tag we made up was hide and seek lava tag, where one person would close their eyes and count to 30, and we would all run and hide in different parts of the playground. And when the game started, the tagger had to find, chase, and tag you. You could only go on the floor for 5 seconds, or you were made the tagger, and the tagger could only touch the equipment for 20 seconds before having to get off. We would play this for hours. With all the snow we get, there's usually at least one power outage a year. So then there's no TV or internet. So my parents and I usually break out the board games, like Connect 4, Look, and Checkers. So at the kitchen table, we would be playing board games by lamplight. We are not usually competitive with each other, but when it comes to checkers, we are. Checkers is usually a quick game for most, with how you don't usually think about the moves, but we treat it like chess, with how we try to think of the person's next moves. Once I played a game with my mom for almost an hour, with how we were playing, and at this point, the power had been back on for about 30 minutes. My mom is someone who works hard, with how I've watched her make over 50 masks for kids at a children's hospital during COVID, as well as study accounting for when she was voted to be the PTA treasurer. She's also a strong person, with how when she was having medical issues, she would still help out at my school during lunch and still take me to the park after school. She's someone I respect because she never once gave up when things got tough. From the age of 6, I knew that I had a learning disability that made it harder to read, spell, and do math. Now, being a 6-year-old and knowing that you can't read and spell while your peers can seemingly do it just fine can make you feel pretty dumb. Then I'm put in a class where for about an hour I get extra help in reading and writing with other kids in my grade. But after a while, I started to realize the kids in that class come and go, but I was still there after 3 years. So then, being a 9-year-old and still reading books like Fly Guy while your classmates read The Magic Tree House and Harry Potter made me feel really crappy. Later on in middle school, I had an English teacher that challenged me, but gave me the time and instructions that I needed so that I could do well in English. After almost 5 years, I could actually say that I liked reading and writing, something that I hated for the longest time. At that point, I stopped letting my struggles control me and started taking action in the way I learned. Today, I still struggle with reading and writing, but I know the best ways for me to